Right, let's get into the topic of conversation. I did mention that we will be discussing what the new financing funding model means for universities, means for the Varsities, as well as for admissions. I now have a full panel: Professor Stephen KIAMA, Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi; Professor Washington Okeo, Vice Chancellor, the Management, University of Africa. Representing the CEO of the Higher Education Loans Board on this panel, and that is Charles Rigera, is Joseph Ndegwa Kingori, who is the lending manager, and we have Cyprian Ombati, the National Vice Chairman, Oasu. Good to have all you gentlemen with us here in studio today to help provide some clarity for the purposes of raising public awareness. I'll start with you, Professor KIAMA. I was listening to that press briefing at State House, Nairobi, when the president unveiled the new funding model, and he said that you may be grey not because of your age, but because I also have the grey hair here, but because of the pressure you have been undergoing as one at the helm of a public university, receiving half of your requirement in budgetary allocation and being in debt. The president, I believe, said to the tune of 60 billion, Kenyan universities in debt to the tune of 60 billion shillings. Was he speaking the truth, Professor KIAMA?
Yes, he was speaking the truth. But now a prescription has been given. Just like the way when you are unwell, you are given some antibiotics and you are told you need to take this for 5 days, 7 days. So, you know, the new model is not a quick fix. Mm-hmm. It's something that is going to ensure universities cover in another 4, 5, 6 years. But from now, people start receiving their dose. So I believe now I'm on the right trajectory. Once I get the correct dose, then there will be recovery of the universities. But with time, not a quick fix, because it is beginning only with the new intake. Mm-hmm. The new model is only with the new intake.
Yes.
Then after that, you have another second intake next year, like that, until all the students in the university have been covered in terms of the fees required from them. For now, they come with a little money. You have to borrow money to keep them running. Yes. And okay. How that's not sustainable.
Okay.
Yes.
I had him say it has been retained, the fees have been retained at 16,000 for the last 34 years. Is that an accurate picture?
This, there is what was tuition that the students were paying. They were paying 16,000.
Okay.
But the government was still giving grants to cover the costs. But the amount of money available from government was not increasing as fast as the number of students were increasing going to the universities. You know, for a long time there was only one university, public university. Then after that there has been many other public universities and private universities. So as the numbers were increasing, the amount of money was not increasing in the same measure. So the amount going per student was reducing. And that was dangerous because that was about to affect the quality of the university education in a big way. Yeah. Okay.
I have some figures, some of the figures he gave. Before I move on, because I'm seeing Mr. Kingori is agreeing, he's nodding. He's a numbers expert at the Higher Education Loans Board. But were you involved in this process of coming up with this new funding model?
Yes. You know, I'm a member of the Presidential Working Party. And we reflected on this matter for quite some time since our appointment on what would be the best model of financing universities. Obviously, the easier way is just to say the government should cover the cost. But now this was pushed back to us and we were told, look, why do you think the government has not done it over years as you continue to accumulate those debts? So there must be a better solution than that one. So we reflected and said, now the issue is who pays for the fees? The fees need to be known, but who pays for it? It should be paid by the government because the government has an interest to ensure there is training in strategic areas. It must be, that cost must also be met by through loans, and that cost must be met also by household. Depending, even now, you know, even in basic education, there are parents who take their children to private secondary schools, isn't it? And they pay full fees because they also believe that their kids need to go through good education. So we were involved, and we contributed, and we made that proposal, and the president agreed with it.
All right. So you put your minds together with the President's Economic Council, as I understood it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It took us quite some time. Yeah.
Quite some time.
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Kinger, good morning.
Good morning.
So the president talked about now how this funding will work is the cohort that is coming in will be classified under vulnerable, less vulnerable, and able. Now, depending on where you fall in that spectrum, it will determine the scholarship, the amount of scholarship, the percentage of scholarship you qualify for, loan, or how much your household will chip in for your higher education. So this classification, he said, is going to be based on a model that HELBA has developed over 20 years. And he referred to it as the means instrument. Yes. What is this means instrument?
Well, it's called a means testing instrument. It is a simple tool that checks the household ability to pay or not to pay fees for their children. And when you're doing that, you look at other expenses the household is having. For example, you look at how much are they spending on education on other children. So you look at that against the income plus the other costs like food, rent, and so on. So when you compute that, you'll be able to know whether the family can be able to pay. Because if the family income is 100,000 and they're using all the money on other costs, including education, it means the family cannot pay even a coin. So you have to fund them for the full cost of the university education. And this instrument, we have used it for more than 20 years. In fact, about 25 years. And okay, any instrument, of course, we cannot say it is 100%, but the margin of error is very tiny. It's something that we are very comfortable about. And we also give room for anybody who is not, because these students, we never see them face to face. They fill a form from a remote place. Then we look at the data they have given us. We use the criteria on the data, and we allocate. Sometimes that criteria may not apply 100% to everybody, because households or even individual children, there are things they cannot declare in that form. So we give them room to come to us through many forums that we have. Yeah.
All right. And I remember Mr. Ringera being asked, how do we know that people will not game the system? And he said, we get a letter from your chief and your pastor. Did I understand him correctly? Or
yes.
Maybe I didn't hear too well.
We have been doing validations on the ground from your priests and the Kathy and the chief. And that's just a part of it. But majorly what you're relying on is validation of the data with third-party data sets. With people like Kenya Revenue Authority, IPLS, the population, integrated population, something. This one for registration of persons, register of deaths. So if you say that your parent is not alive, we just check with the register of deaths and we'll see it there. If you say you are disabled or you have disability, we just check. We have an API with the National Council for People Living with Disability. So the validations are stronger on those indicators, because generally what Kenyans will do, they will self-declare income, and most of the time, it is not correct. Most of them will even kill their parents. Yeah, they say my parent is not there. Then I find the Professor Washington on the street. I say, oh, you mean you're here? Okay, so we normally don't rely on what they tell us. And in fact, if you look at our criteria, we don't even ask what is your income. Okay, there is a place you indicate your income, but we don't use it. We use other indicators which can show that you are a needy person. For example, if I find you parked in a Mercedes-Benz in town here, what comes into my mind? This guy is doing well, isn't it? But if I find you in a tuk-tuk or a border, then I say this one is struggling. So those indicators are able to tell us what kind of income you're likely to have. Yeah.
All right. So you rely on information from other agencies as well to verify the information provided by the applicants.
Correct.
All right. So we'll get more into that. But the private universities represented this morning by Prof. Washington Okeo, and he is the Vice Chancellor, the Management University of East Africa. On Friday, there was a full-page press release released by the Kenya Association of Private Universities, and they said, we are happy to announce that private universities were involved in the discussions surrounding the development of the new funding model. So it reads to me like you're fully in support, Professor Okeo.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to say thank you very much for welcoming me to this studio this morning. And I'm grateful to be part and parcel of this very important discussion and discourse. As far as being involved in the discussions around the new funding model is concerned, yes, I would say we are fully involved. First of all, private universities have got an umbrella body that is called the Kenya Association of Private Universities. It is an umbrella body which houses in fact, all private universities are members of that union, that association, sorry. During this discussion on the new funding model, we have our chairman, who is Professor Mbugua, the Vice Chancellor of Catholic University of Eastern Africa, who is a member of the Presidential Task Force that was working on this new funding model. And as my colleague, Professor KIAMA, said, the task force members were involved in the formulation of this new funding model. And so private universities were also involved because our chairman of KAPU, Professor Mbugua, was fully involved in this. And he made contributions. I know he consulted us as the KAPU Executive Committee, where I am as the Treasurer, and also the other KAPU university members were also involved, and all our inputs have gone into this new funding model.
All right.
Yeah.
So we need to take a break, but first let's hear from one Cyprian Ombati, who's the National Vice Chair, Oasu. And I was just pulling up some of what you've said on this subject in various interviews. But, you know, we have seen you time and again calling for a press conference as, you know, the unionists, as unions in the universities sector. And, you know, mnasema bado mapambano. How have things been? Because it seems to me like you have really experienced where the pinch of the shoe.
True. Yes, for us as a university staff, we want to say that the formula that the government has given so as to sort out the problems in universities, we hope that at the end of the day it will be able to sort out the mess that is in public universities especially, because you find this also affects staff. We have universities debts of about 61 billion. Mm-hmm. And when you look at that, you find that a good number of those debts are meant for staff members. Here we are talking matters to do with pension, matters to do with NHIF being not remitted. Our bank loans are not remitted. You find that members who belong to various circles and insurance companies where they have taken policies, their monies are not remitted. And you find that if this is happening, then it means that staff working at the university is demotivated to work. However much you may want them to deliver, it will be very difficult for them. So for us, we are only hopeful that from this, the government may be able to sort out the problem and the mess that we as workers face. And you find that if this is sorted, then the problems will be fine. I have seen they have given emphasis to maybe students. Mm-hmm. We do hope that soon they'll be able to move to look at problems that are bedeviling staff at public universities. Because yes, students will be sorted in terms of fees, but remember that if our staff is not paid fully his salary, then there is no way he's going to deliver at the university. If our staff has never had an increment of his salary for the last 6 or 7 years, there is no way you expect that staff to perform however much you have sorted out the issue of fees at public universities.
All right, so this for you is something that is long overdue.
Yes.
This action.
Yes.
All right, so Professor KIAMA, you know, have you been at one point or the other forced to hide in your office when your staff members are demanding we want our dues? But we'll come back with that and more on the other side of this break. We continue the conversation with Professor Stephen KIAMA, VC, University of Nairobi, Professor Washington Okeo, VC, Management, University of Africa, also representing Charles Rigara, the CEO, HELB. On this panel is Joseph Ndegwa King'ori, Lending Manager, and last we heard from Cyprian Ombati, National Vice Chair, Oasu. I'll invite, I was just talking on a light note, Professor KIAMA, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what it has been like managing, balancing the books over the last few years on the other side of this break.
It has been very difficult, very difficult.
All right, welcome back to AM Live, and with me in studio we have Professor Stephen KIAMA, Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, Professor Washington Okeo, the Management VC, the Management, University of Africa, representing Charles Rigara, who is the CEO, HELB. On this panel we have Joseph Ndegwa King'ori and Cyprian Ombati, National Vice Chairman, Oasu. Let's just take a look at some of the statistics. Let me just take you through quickly some of the statistics the President gave, and he talked about in this financial year there was an allocation of 54 billion shillings, which is set to be increased by 56% in the 2023-2024 financial year to 84.6 billion shillings. Just looking at the number of, the President gave an idea of how many TVET trainees are there now compared to those that were there 8 years ago. So 327,000 now from 90,000 8 years ago. So from 30,000 to 17,000 per trainee per year. Universities, I've already mentioned this figure, indebted to the tune of 60.2 billion shillings. The 54 billion shillings budgeted for, the President told us, is less than 50% of the requirement for universities to run. The current student fees students are paying was agreed to 34 years ago. The President said the situation now will be that it will be graduated on an yearly basis by the Kenya National, let me see what he said exactly. KNBS will work out how these fees will be graduated year by year. Okay, and so he said overall there shall be 4 funding streams to ensure the sustainability of universities and TVETs. This shall include 1, student-centered funding, research funding, capital, infrastructure funds, and fee for service consultancy. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of this, Professor KIAMA, I was asking you, hey, how has it been?
Yes, I said it has been very difficult. I don't know which is the better word to use. And you mentioned it right when the President said the hair is turning grey very fast because of some of this. You know, when I came in 2020, I just came and within very little time you are finding auctioneers coming to pick university vehicles because they have not, somebody has not been paid, some supplier. You find Kenya Power coming to disconnect power, even including from student hostels, even from the main administration. You just come and find the water has been disconnected. And then I just, trying to see where to get money, you find you owe banks money, you owe this money, you owe, so it was very difficult. But as a university community, under my leadership, we said we must now begin to change the way we do things. At least not to continue to incur more debts. And we have been on this transformative path until the university, we are not acquiring more and more debts. But we are still somewhere in the hole, crawling out. Yeah.
But how do you manage not to incur more debt if the allocation you're receiving is not commensurate?
We began by beginning to say we have to cut costs. We say if there was some glass, perhaps we used to cut nice loan and we leave it to grow. You get it? Because we don't have money to pay. If we get someone to come and cut that one, we don't have money to pay. If we needed to, we needed before to go and get overdrafts from the bank, which are costly, we say, now we will not get overdraft, we will delay to pay. Yeah? When we get the money, we pay, rather than borrow to pay. When staffs retire, we try to reorganize that. The person who is there, we say, you do this, and for the person who retired, like that. So downsizing on the staff based on the natural attrition. So those are some of the things we are doing, but it is not quick like this. It's progressive, and we have managed to quite some good extent not to borrow. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But there's something Ombati said. And were you forced to shift your focus from, education to, because I know your background is veterinary, to now the money? How do we sustain it? It became, is it more a business?
Yes.
Are universities, public universities now being run more as businesses, or, or were you focused, where was your focus?
It's something I would have mentioned, because you mentioned about the issue of debt, and but you mentioned 61 billion. Yeah, it is just a matter of priority by government. You know how much the fuel subsidy costed us? It was about 140 something billion within a very short time. But this 60 billion is of a long time. It's about priority by government, because if all of us take the issue of development of human capacity as core, as important for the country, future, then we will put money there. So this thing of 1 billion was, but for us, we are responsible citizens. Yeah. So we said, okay, we know that. Yeah, even as we wait for partners and the other people to work with us. Also, we increase a lot of people now doing research and writing. Universities are business. And the service they give is teaching and learning and research. Those are the core things we give. Universities world over, when you bring a student, you pay the fees to that student. So it's like a shop. When you come to get a service, you pay for it. Yeah. It is not that you walk in and then you don't pay. Somebody has to pay. Even where it is said it is free, government pays student by student. Either gives a student loan to come and pay, or pays the full fees. Because the university are not there to make profit or anything like that. So it's not that business in that context. The more money you get, a university gets, the better the quality of education it offers, the better the quality of the professors you hire, and the better the motivation of staff. Yeah. And therefore you get better products outside. Yeah. So that is how the university works. It's not that business where now you make more money to go for holidays and the other, but it's business, but money is plowed back for better quality of education.
All right. Yeah. Because many people ask, were these universities more focused about staying in the black more than really research and all that, because you are preoccupied with, again, balancing the books? But we'll continue with that line of thought. But first, Mr. Kingori, what's going to change? The president says more money has been allocated to universities for this upcoming financial year. Does that translate to more people will have access to HELB loans? Will they have access to more in terms of the monies they can get from HELB? How will this impact your operations?
Maybe what has changed, and was not there before, is that students now will have to apply for scholarships. They were not applying before. Remember, they were being given as grants direct to university. So they'll have to apply. So we are doing that portal with UFB. Then all students who apply will get, all of them. Previously, we could get about maybe 2-3% will not get, even when they apply. But now for the scholarship, everybody must get. So I think what the government is trying to do is to eliminate finance as a barrier to higher education. And I can see very deliberate deliberate efforts. We have, I think this year alone, allowed 22 billion shillings will go to universities, an additional 22 billion. And this is the money Prof is talking about, that it's like a medicine you have been given, so kunya pole pole. Yeah, but basically I think also HELB is going to get more money than we got previously. In the current estimates, we are supposed to get 17 billion. And now I can see we are getting 20.3 billion. So an additional 5 billion for universities only. Yeah.
Okay. How about private universities, Professor Okeo? Were you benefiting from these grants? Because the president said where those going to study in private universities are concerned, they will not receive scholarships, but they are eligible for loans. Will that anyway? How does that? Will that in any way change the dynamics where private universities are concerned?
Thank you very much. Before I respond to that, maybe I can add a little bit on what you asked Professor KIAMA, on how the university should run, whether they should run as businesses or something. What I wanted to add is what Professor KIAMA has said is true, that you need to run universities as, in terms of producing the best of academics, because that is the role of universities, is to teach, is to do research, and a little bit of community engagement and development. However, if you look at the amount of money, for example, that the government gives public universities, it's colossal. And if that money is not invested from a business mindset or a business perspective, then it would not be easy to utilize that money for the intended purposes. And there are two aspects. There's a development part, and then there is the recurrent expenditure. All those have to be done from a business mindset perspective. Because if it is not done, then you may invest in a project which may not be economically viable at the end of the day. And then that money will be a sunk money or sunk cost. At the same time, the recurrent expenditure, which includes salaries and other, recurrent amount of money that is being paid by the universities, they have to be prudently managed from a business perspective. The end game is not for the universities to make money, public universities to make money. But because they are in the business of providing services, those services must be provided at costs which are manageable. So that is what I wanted to add there.
And Professor, I understand because your background is entrepreneurship.
Yes. Thank you very much. So going back to whether private universities were being funded by the government or were being given grants, and then how then that is going to impact the private universities going forward. I want to say that, and I want to thank the Kenya government for having considered the plight of the Kenyan student, a Kenyan kid who is coming to the universities, and looked at it over the last years, I think starting 2016, as Kenyan children and Kenyan students who deserve education wherever they go, irrespective of whether they decide to go to public universities or to private universities. Because the responsibility of the government is to make sure that every citizen gets the services that they deserve. Because after all, either these citizens themselves or the parents or guardians of these citizens pay taxes. And it is from these taxes that the government then uses to educate or use to educate the Kenyan citizen, the Kenyan children. And so that is what happened in 2016 when the government started allocating allocating students to private universities as well as public universities. Because before that, they had the JAB, Joint Admissions Board, which was only for public universities. Now, in 2016, the government started allocating students to private universities also, and through KUCCPS, that is the placement body. And with that, the government started paying tuition to the students that they allocate to private universities. The government was not giving any grant to private universities. It's wrongly connoted as grant, but no, it was not grant. The government was paying tuition to the students that are located in private universities.
So this 16,000?
This 16,000, exactly. It is the 16,000 that was being paid. However, there was also the differentiated cost unit, which was being paid to each student based on the course that he was undertaking or that he is undertaking. To that end, the government had committed to pay 70,000 for the business courses, because my university, the Management University of Africa, we run business courses mainly and leadership courses. And so the government started by paying 70,000 shillings per student towards the tuition. And, but it sort of gradually kept coming down until, as we speak now, for the students that we have on board, the government is paying about 48,000, yeah, about 22,000 shillings down from that. In addition to that, even what is being paid is not being remitted to the university fully. There's actually a huge amount which the government owes all private universities. The Management University of Africa is owed about 34 million shillings in respect of the students that have been placed to our university. And so the university is actually kind of co-sponsoring those students, because some of these students have already graduated, and we don't see a situation where we are going to get that money back, you know, from the government. So it is our contribution, like a sponsorship from the universities. So as far as the effect is concerned, I think you asked about the effect.
Yes.
In the immediate terms, the effect is minimal because the deallocation to private or students to private universities is gradual. Starting with this year, there will be, the ones who will be allocated, the government will not pay for them fees. But then it is up to us, managers of private universities, to come up with a sponsorship system similar to what the government has created for the public universities. And some of our universities, like Management University of Africa, already has that sponsorship system. We have what we call an endowment fund. Through this endowment fund system, we admit students irrespective of their background, irrespective whether they are poor, whether they are able. So the financial capability is not a criteria for us to admit students. We admit them based on their qualification. Similarly, the ones who are placed by the government, they are placed based on their qualification. If we find that they are unable to pay their fees, then we use our endowment fund to sponsor these students, and so that we are able to make sure that they continue with their education. The endowment fund, of course, is a philanthropic fund that we kind of invite the public to help us, contribute to the fund. Recently, I think last week, the other Saturday, the other week, we did a charity walk in Mombasa, and we're supported by different organizations, different entities, including the county government of Mombasa, during the walk. Through those initiatives, we make sure that we have sufficient fund to enable us pay for the fees of the students who are needy but bright, who we admit into the university. So in the long run, those are the kind of initiatives that the private university and other private universities have them. For example, USIU just advertised for students to be admitted through their endowment fund or a sponsorship program. A lot of private universities have those kind of initiatives.
Okay.
And one of the reasons is because public universities are directly funded by the government.
Yes.
But private universities are not funded by the government. Public universities' salaries, infrastructure, and other utilities and so on are paid for directly by the government. But private universities are not. So private universities have to raise money to be able to support their initiatives as universities, to be able to provide the businesses the services to the students.
Okay, so I'm understanding Professor Okeo to mean, actually, I've been saying Management University of East Africa, and it's Africa. I do beg I beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. That is an oversight on my part. Apologies. But I'm understanding him to say there are scholarships available, but you'll have to apply directly to the universities. But Mr. Ombati, before we got here, there was talk of privatizing universities to make them more competitive. You opposed that, if I understood correctly. Why?
Yes, we opposed privatization of universities because when you look at the way universities are supposed to be run, the truth of the matter is that the government should not be able to run away from their responsibility. It is the prerogative of government to fund public universities because public universities are state universities, they are government universities, and therefore the sponsor is the taxpayer through government. If you find government trying to evade that so that they privatize the university, thinking that if they are privatized, they'll be run better, I think they are trying to bury their head in the sand from a matter that they can be able to handle at within a minute. What I mean by this is when you look at the structure of how universities are, universities have about 4 pillars, the key ones. The first pillar is students. You find that a university cannot be there without students. And for this one, I want to say that the government has really done a lot, even including the new model, because that one is student focused.
Yes.
So that we see how students can pay their fee. That one, they have done it better. The second pillar we have is we have parents and guardians who should also do their role of enabling that these students who's brought to a public universities, fees are paid and all that, and they present them there. That one also, there is no problem. The third pillar is the government itself or sponsors. If I talk of private universities, we also have the sponsors or the owners. This pillar is the one to ensure that this university is funded so that it can be able to run as it ought to. When you look at public universities, it is the government to put money there so that these entities are run. It is the same way schools. We have not had anybody telling schools that, even private schools, we have not heard them saying that, oh, we need this help and all that. It is the government that puts money there so that the school is run. The same way, public universities, they expect that the government to put money there. What we are seeing in our government is they try to run away from that, thinking that these universities can generate money on their own. And something that we have always said, that a university is not a factory, that you expect that by the end of the day, they'll have sales in the evening and you get money. It does not work that way. But if they put proper money there, universities will be able to channel out and give out graduates who will be able to go out, work and bring more tax. The president the other day said that the greatest resource that Kenya has is the human resource. And who is the producer? It is the universities in Kenya, both public and private. So what we are asking the government is, when it comes to public universities, can you do the necessary? You find that, as Prof said here, the problem we have with our government is they don't put money where it belongs. They don't prioritize education. You find that we have several funds out here where monies are put and some of them are stolen. But when it comes to public universities, they want to tell you, we are giving you 10% or 20%, go and look for the rest. From where? We are asking the government, if they do their part, we'll be able to go far. The other one is, if you look at the last pillar, is staff. In each and every university, we have staff. Staff is the most neglected. If I talk of public universities, and I'm seeing even today's headlines in the newspaper, they are talking of teachers CBA. We have never heard of a CBA for public staff at the public universities. Why? Because again, the government doesn't care. It is the government to give us our salaries. That one, they cannot run away from that. We have civil servants, and I can tell you this, who are earning much, much more than government workers in public universities. Why? Because for them, you have never heard them even going on strike. Why? Because when their monies are due, the government sets aside. But when it comes to public universities, who doesn't know that for us to get our dues, we must go to the street? If the government looks at these 4 pillars, the one that is most neglected is staff. Let them pump money in, and then they'll be able to see product. As I said, and as I finish, you cannot expect a worker in a public university who does not know how he'll take his children to hospital because the NHIF there has collapsed. We don't have a medical policy. If you come to government workers, they are given mortgage, leave alone the housing fund that they are talking about. As we are speaking, government workers are enjoying mortgage. We do not have a mortgage scheme in public universities. Are we children of a lesser God? That is what we are asking, that if the government puts priority. Another day, the minority leader said that, watu wachoka. That is how despised we are as staff in public universities. If the government is able to give these staff what belongs to them, we will be able to see public universities performing. In the early 70s, they said, a professor, and Prof here can tell you because maybe that time they were students, professors who were working in Kenya, their salary was equivalent to a PS. How about right now? It is not the same case. So let government go back and look. And I can tell you, even if you go to other countries, we have lecturers who are qualified from here, who are teaching in Botswana, who are teaching in Uganda, who are teaching in Tanzania. Why? Yet we say that Kenya is the best economy in East Africa. But when it comes to payment of salaries, we are not there. This has led even to our academic staff, some of them going back home to vie as MCAs. When they go there, they are told that you cannot vie as an MCA because you are highly qualified. You have so many papers. Why do you want this small position? Why are they doing that? We need this staff to be at the university to do research if they are properly motivated. But as long as my dues are not paid, my salary is half, my loans are not remitted, my CBA has not been revised for the last 6 or 7 years, how do you expect this staff to work more? So we are asking the government, let priorities be done right. We only need a few billions. The government collects trillions of shillings. Public universities require slightly less than 100 billion and their problems are sorted.
All right. I'm curious because you raised the question of research. You are at Kabianga?
Yes.
How have you felt this impact of this debt or, and this shortfall in funding in your research? Has it affected it in any way?
Yes, it has. When you look at public universities, I'm a scientist. You expect me to do research, to be able to come out with a product or a medicine for cancer, for example. How can I do that when my laboratory back at the university does not have the necessary equipment? Across all public universities, it is the government to fund those public universities, to place the infrastructure there, so that now when I'm doing research, I must have the basis. The basics must be there. Because you don't expect me to enter into a lab where there are no reagents, there are no equipment. How do you conduct research? Because some of those equipments, I cannot buy them using my own money. Sometimes, especially in sciences, I want to tell you the foundational infrastructure must be there. And who is to provide that? It's the government. When you go to other countries, which we are comparing and saying, you see, in South Africa it is like this and that, that's South Africa. Go there and see their universities. They are state universities, funded, properly having the right equipments, and they do research. If we are given that, why should I go to politics to be an MCA? I'll be conducting research, and through research I'll be able to bring more money to the government than running for politics.
But what do you have against MCAs? Anyway, Professor KIAMA, something has changed, right?
Yes.
Because universities were advised to publish, let me see, the cost of the courses, right? Let me confirm. With my notes here. So the president said universities and TVETs will no longer receive block funding in the form of grants based on differentiated unit costs. University funding will henceforth be student-centered, as Mr. Mbati correctly stated, and be apportioned to university students according to their level of need. So how does this change how things have worked?
It changes this way, that for every student, the required fees will be paid for every student admitted to the university, whether public or private universities. Because before, what was happening is that the number of students admitted every year will increase, but the amount of money available is this. So for each student, you pay this amount. Like the last count, for each student, the fees being paid was 48% of what is needed. If, for example, you are supposed to pay for medicine 600,000.
Yes.
So the fees that will be paid is 48% of that, less than 300,000. And the student now is sent to the university. So that is not sustainable, because the number would have continued to increase, and finally you will say you are paying 20% fees, but don't charge any extra fees to the student, because we pay the 20%. It's like you open a shop in your neighborhood, and people come, they in the neighbor, they want to get sugar, they want to get salt, they want to get tea leaves from you, but when they pick those things, they tell you, we have only 50% of the costs of the things you have put in the basket. And they walk away. And they think that you are happy, and they're happy because they gave you 50%. The risk of this is that tomorrow you come, and if the shop is closed. So that is not a sustainable model. The model now is that as a student you are admitted. When you are admitted, full fees is paid for you. If it is like what I said, if it's that medicine like 600,000, if you are coming from a background where even to come from secondary, in your secondary education, you are getting bursaries. Everybody knows your family was like this. The government will pay the 600,000 for you as grant. Yeah. If you came from some other private secondary school, let's say you came from Peponi for just purpose of, or any other, where you pay quite a substantial amount of money per year, then it is known. Then you said, okay, you get opportunity to come to the university, but the household, you will cover the cost, but also 600,000. Okay. Another one, the government, you assist in loan, household, and also grant to still get 600. So every student, it is the same fee. Not continuing to reduce the amount of fee that a student is paying, and the universities are expected to give the same quality of education. So that is what this method is saying. So it's student-centered. It is student by student. And that is why I mentioned you are a student who was educated through bursaries or through, and the records are there. Or you are a student who came through private primary school, private secondary school, private this, and it is known how much you are paying from those secondary school you are coming from. Then how come when you come to the university, government says it's going to pay for you, and the government does not have enough money, so it pays just a little. So you come to the university, and you wonder, you came from a place where everything was very clean, the toilets were clean. You come to a university and you find things are not well maintained. You wonder, what kind of thing is this? But it is a government which has said, no. We are going to pay for you 100,000, and you go to class. But you have money to pay 200,000. You get it? So that's why it is student-centered. Every student will pay same amount of fee for a certain program. Then the fee that is known, it was costed, is what we call the differentiated cost. And now, every year, because of inflation and all this kind of thing, it will be adjusted upward, mainly, to ensure that all students who come to the university get the best quality education. That is the aim, that everybody must get. We cannot continue to downgrade the quality of education in the universities, because those are the people we expect to serve us. These are doctors. You come as a doctor to train as a doctor, and then what is provided is half the cost of what you require to be trained. So the risk is you also get less quality of training. That person is the one who is going to treat the Kenyan population. That is not a sustainable model. So what we have now is a sustainable model that if the fees is this, everybody pays that fees.
All right. So we need to take a break, but when we come back, we'll hear more from my panel. We have in studio Professor Stephen KIAMA, who you've heard from, Professor Washington Okeo. We have Joseph Ndegwa Kingori, as well as Cyprian Ombati. See you on the other side of this break. All right, welcome back to AM Live, and we are looking at what the new university's funding model means for Varsities and admissions. And I want to bring in Mr. Kingori at this point. Now that universities have published, what each cost will cost, which costs will cost. For example, Professor KIAMA has talked about, let's say, medicine, for instance, 600,000. So how does it work?
I think let's start with the placement, what has happened is that those courses have been put in the COOPS portal with the actual cost. So when a student goes to make a decision on which university to go, he'll be looking at the program, which university is it, and how much. Now, how the modeling has been done is that the government is going to provide an average of 61% in scholarships. And then an average of 36% of that cost will be a loan. And then the 7% household contribution.
Wait, so this, wait. Let me, sorry, I'm just opening the portal. But this depends on the level, whether you're vulnerable, less vulnerable.
Yes, now I'll go into that now.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay,
so on average, those are the average, especially for undergraduate students. But what is happening, like, for example, we give medicine. Professor KIAMA has declared 643,000 for medicine. And that's not expensive. You look at Aga Khan is 1.2, so it's still subsidized. And if you look at what is 36% of that, it's around 188. That is, no, first let's start with the discounting. 643, he'll give a 15% discount.
Why is he giving a discount?
That is a requirement. It's the modeling, the requirement by government. I think it's like, what do you contribute? What are you giving also? So his fees now comes from 643 to allowed 543,000. Now that 543,000 is the actual cost of the program. So you take that, and on average, 61% is supposed to be a scholarship, and that 6% of that is supposed to be a loan, and 7% of that is supposed to be household contribution. But now let's go to the vulnerable and the extremely needy. If you look at the vulnerable, they are not supposed to pay anything. Actually, the scholarship is 82% of the cost. So if Professor KIAMA is charging 543 after discounting, 82% of that will be a scholarship. Then the loan will only be 18%. So you see now that student is covered, and that will cover about almost 30,000 students. There are about 45,000 students in the university. Now, if you look at the less needy, now the scenario changes. The scholarship for them is about 18%, and the loan component is 54%, and the balance the household contributes. So I think that is the way you look at it, and there's a lot of focus on the very needy, and you can see the way the scholarship is graduating from a high of 82% to a low of 18% for the less needy. And then maybe on there's something I also wanted to add on what he said, maybe as a contribution. HELB is also trying to look at private universities, and although we are going to we shall continue supporting the students there using loans. But we're also having a model which we are working with so many counties, so many universities, so many institutions, like KIAMA. So they normally bring money to us, and we manage for them. And it's very interesting. They can even give us money they want to pay salary next week. They give it to us, then we pay the students, and actually we pay the money back to the university. So you see, they have given us the money, we have allocated the students have gone to school, then we pay you back the money. So you can even use it for salary. So it's a revolving fund, and it's really working. And we are looking at private universities and saying, how can we support them apart from what we are doing? And already Mount Kenya, we have an MOU with them, so the funding will start anytime soon. And they are bringing in quite a lot of money. But not all private universities, of course, have that kind of money, but we are looking at the ones who can even save. Whatever you want to use for your recurrent, we can use it. You give it on Monday, on Tuesday we allocate the students, on Wednesday we pay to the university back, and you use it to pay salaries. So it's something that we are looking at also. And we have done that with so many institutions in Kenya, almost 39 institutions, counties, corporates, people like even Johnson & Johnson, USAID. So we have a lot of capacity and expertise in that area also.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But speaking of a revolving fund and it's working, Kenya has been talking about loans and default. What are the repayment rates so far from the persons who have borrowed, and when are you required to start paying back?
Okay, when you borrow, there is a 1-year moratorium after you complete your school. So after that, we expect you to start paying. And if you don't pay, there are some penalties prescribed by law on that. Number 2.
Is it 5,000 shillings monthly?
Yeah, per month. It was put in law in 1985. But how does a revolving fund work? the spirit of a revolving fund is that the students who are exiting pay for the ones who are coming in. If I can give an example of this year, I have funded about 343,000 students, 343 plus, who are on their own program. But the people who are paying, they are 322,000. So you see the number paying is smaller than the number that is already in school. And that's why we have a gap. But even somebody will ask, why do we even have a bigger gap? Because we expect the gap to be so small. We have also looked at the average loan that these people are paying. Because of incomes in Kenya, some of them cannot afford to pay more than 1,000. Some are even paying 550 shillings per day on M-Pesa. Others, but the ones who are working, of course, we are trying to implement what we call an income contingent kind of repayment system. So that if your salary is 100, we take maybe like 5–10% of that. And the law allows us up to 25%, but we don't do that. So if we want to make sure that these guys who are exiting pay for the ones who are coming, the secret is to increase the repayment rate per month, per person. So that someone like Olive, if I'm paying for a student 60,000, I make you pay 60,000 per year. So it will be 60,000 divided by 12. So that's 5,000 shillings per month, which is affordable for somebody who's working. So that is the spirit of a law, and it is working. If you look at the repayment rate for our undergraduate loan, we are now doing more than 76% performing. Only a few hardcore 25% who we are still trying to smoke out, and they will not be there for long, in a short time. In fact, there are some products we have that are performing at almost 96%. Like the Afia Erima, this is a program for nurses, and the postgraduate program where we give money to people who are doing masters and PhDs. So they are performing so well, almost now going to 100%. Yeah, so that is what we are doing, and I think a revolving fund is workable, and we can work with the institutions on how we can do it. And we don't even charge anything much. We just charge 4% as a management fee, and that 4% will come from the recoveries that we will recover. We will not tell the university to pay in advance. So if we recover a loan, we take 4%.
There's a time there was a clamor for, you have the 1 year moratorium,
yes.
But perhaps in that 1 year somebody has not been gainfully employed.
Yeah, Kenyans, yeah, that is true. And some of them, they'll say they're hustling, but you still see them riding vehicles. But it is true there's a problem in the market about jobs, but all is not lost. We are still seeing young people getting jobs, especially online jobs. And also we are seeing even the public sector trying to absorb. You see the public sector, we are aging. The people who are there are my age, 55 and above. And so they are also trying to recruit as part of the succession planning. So there's some hope as we go on, and especially if the economy starts performing.
All right. Okay, Professor Okeo, we were discussing the privatization of universities. But there's something interesting, and we'll get into that, because you are proposing, you are saying that even the private sector has a role to play in keeping public universities running as they should, because public university, we expect them to do research in areas that will benefit us as a society, not necessarily commercially driven. But you did say there is a place for the private sector to come in.
Yes, thank you very much for remembering that. What happens in other countries, and I'm glad Cyprian mentioned the situation in South Africa. The big South African public universities like University of Cape Coast, like Stellenbosch University in Cape Town, for example, they are huge public universities there. And also you have universities in the United States. Different states have got different universities, like Massachusetts, MIT. You have University of Iowa in the state of Iowa, for example. And I remember that very well because I was there in the month of April. Now, the model that those universities use is very, very important. And if perhaps we can look at those models with the public universities, including private universities, working together with those universities to understudy the models that they use. And it works in a very simple manner, that the citizen, the private citizens, so it doesn't matter whether they're private sector or public sector citizens, they are encouraged to invest, rather to give, to charity in a philanthropic manner so that, for example, if a university needs a laboratory and there is somebody who is endowed with funds outside their private citizen, then he can contribute, he or she can contribute towards the construction of that laboratory, even equipping that laboratory, and then that building and the laboratory itself will be named after him. But importantly, the tax system in the United States, for example, allows an individual who makes that kind of contribution to claim tax, yeah, on that, rather to get tax exemption on that kind of contribution. And this encourages people, because at the end of the day, instead of paying the whole tax out of what income you had, whatever you contribute toward charity is going to be tax exempt. And it is working very, very well. You go to these universities that I'm talking about, more than, I think, 60 to 70% of the buildings, the infrastructure, are actually named after different individuals. University of Iowa has got several buildings named after a gentleman called John Papa John, yeah, who has contributed immensely towards the development of that university. The other thing is the integration of the universities with the communities, so that there's kind of a seamless flow of information and activity between the university and the citizens in their ordinary life, so that citizens see themselves as being part of the university. Their contribution in terms of time, in terms of services, and so on and so forth, go to supplement the kind of contribution that the government makes. So effectively, it will reduce the government's burden of funding the public universities directly.
All right. There's something else that I saw, and something that the president talked about: competitiveness. Universities will now have to be competitive in their course offerings. And it's interesting because I pulled up that statement that you released, the Kenya Association of Private Universities, and you've mentioned several universities, for example, in South Africa. But in this statement, I saw you referenced universities in America as well. You mentioned MIT. You mentioned MIT just now, but paragraph 3 says private universities the world over continue to contribute significantly to the social and economic growth of developed and developing countries. In the United States of America, for example, top Ivy League universities such as Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, MIT, Johns Hopkins, Cornell, among others, are all private universities which have and continue to contribute immensely to the growth of humanity and societies through research and training. Now that the funding model has changed, are you feeling the pressure that now you really need because now people are comparing costs, I'm contributing 7% of this thing. Are you feeling the pressure as private universities?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying the role of private universities is to provide education to the citizens. And education, providing that education is actually a service that private universities do. A lot of private universities do not operate on profit-making model or basis. Like my university, Management University of Africa, we are actually a not-for-profit university. If we don't make any profits, if we make any surpluses, it goes back to the students. So it is more or less the service that we provide to the students that is important to us. And what has been happening is that is not going to change from what has been happening. Because like I said earlier, the number of students the government has been allocating to private universities has been very small. In fact, in my university, the government has been allocating between 10 to 15% of our total student population, which is very, very small indeed. So, and like I said earlier, we do not chase the students away because they haven't paid fees, particularly the government-sponsored students. The government-sponsored students were told that we are giving you students, and let us not hear that you chase the students away because they don't have money or because they have not paid fees. So we don't chase them away, much as the government owes us money. But importantly, it is the models that private universities use. Private universities are run along the business mindset models, so that efficiencies are very high, effectiveness is very high. Most private universities actually have very few students in each classroom. So we operate on a small number of student basis, but that also enables us to be able to provide them with high quality education, because the attention on per student is way higher than where you have some 500 students per class being attended to by one lecturer. And there are some universities, I think mostly public, that have those kind of numbers, some of them 200. So the focus on the student is very, very high, and therefore increasing the level of quality education that we're providing to our students.
But if I can comment on
yes.
Okay, when universities have declared their fees, and we have noted a very interesting trend. Private universities, some of them, they are quite cheap. I saw a university offering computer science at 93,000. Yeah, 93,000. And if that university has 3 terms, okay, they have 3 terms. It means that the student is paying 90,000, 90,000. Now, the modeling of this thing is that it allows the student. If the student chooses to go to a particular university and not another one, then that university will serve. There are some universities, maybe they have to reshape the way they do their things to attract students. And you can see, even when a university is expensive, the issue is not that it is expensive. The issue is that university producing good graduates. And that's why you see students even queuing now to join some programs in Nairobi University. They don't have the capacity to all of them at the same time. They are told, okay, you come in January, you come in September. We have seen that also with Strathmore and quite a number of universities. So that competitiveness, the university will have to shape up to attract students.
All right.
Yes, if I may add something to what is just said,
yes.
which I forgot, what you said is what triggered that in my mind. In terms of the fees structures for various universities, and you will find that, as he has mentioned, there are private universities that are charging as low as 90,000 for computer science. My university is charging, Management University of Africa, is charging 78,600 for the BCom program, which other universities, both private and public, are charging. Some of them are charging 400,000, some of them are charging 300,000, something like that. But we charge 78,600. So in terms of competitiveness, we just look at the costs that we have, our own costs. And the smaller universities like my university, the costs are very low. So we can manage our costs very well. And that is what now determines the kind of fee structure that we charge our students.
All right. I haven't been able to log on to the portal. I don't know whether I needed to have finished my KCSE last year, but
yes, it is. That is the way it's done.
As it is that. But the Standard did provide a bit of a Kenya here, and I will look at that. But before we get into this, speaking of courses and competitiveness, Mr. Ombati, you know, you say some of you guys, professor, wamesoma miaka, but mshahara is not commensurate to the size of the brain. So you said some of your colleagues are opting for political positions. Yes. But do we need to rethink not just the funding model in your view, but also some of these, how we view university education? Because there's a time the government was like, focused really on TVETs. They still are focused on TVETs, saying there's more demand for plumbers than some of these other jobs. And we have 4,000 doctors, 4,000, because we're talking about the cost of medicine, 4,000 doctors out of work. Do we need to rethink, do we need to change mindsets? Because traditionally we're told engineer, lawyer, doctor, those are the jobs to go for.
Yes, when you look at that, I want to say that the government has, for the last few years, they have really emphasized on TVETs, which is a good thing. But what we are saying is that it should not be done at the expense of universities, because whether we like it or not, I have heard people say sometimes that if a student goes to a TVET, then he will be much more employed than one who has gone to a university. And I want to say that is a fallacy. There's nothing like that, because it depends whom do you want. If you are building a house, for example, then you will require a plumber to do 1 or 2 repairs, and that will be TVET. But if you are building a skyscraper or somewhere there, then you need civil engineers. Those are from the universities. And then, of course, normally it is said that for every one graduate, then you require 5 or so technicians. That one we accept. And even when you look at our students from KCSE, it's about 19 or 20% who go to universities. What we are saying is, yes, we know that a large number will go to TVETs, which is okay. As a country, we need to have a national conversation on higher education so that we'll be able now to put priorities where they belong. So that those of universities, they get their dues. Those who are in TVETs, they get their dues. But where we are now, we have reached a point whereby I can say that sometimes even now parents are mixed here and there. I found parents who tell me that, yes, my student, my kid scored maybe a B+. Can I take him to do that plumbing? You know, sometimes it doesn't add value. Because when you look at it honestly, did you require somebody who has a B+ to go to do plumbing? Maybe because you want him to be employed? Yes, this person can go to university and pursue a better course where he'll become. Another thing that people ought to know is that at university level, sometimes it's more of managerial, it's more of thinking, it's more of research. So that when you finish, you should be able, if you are doing electrical engineering, we expect when you go out there, you should be able to do research and come up with better wires that will transmit some of these lights. Whereas somebody who has gone for a TVET or a plumbing, he will be needed to do the repair for that. So if we separate those two things, I want to say that the government will be able to give universities the funds that they require, same way they are doing it for TVETs, so that they will be able to produce the manpower that you require. We cannot have to have doctors and engineers at the expense of maybe those who are in TVETs. So I think it depends on what are the priorities. So we need a national conversation in terms of what programs do we have at universities, what programs do we have at TVET. Yes, I agree. We don't need to churn out graduates out to the country who will be tamarking and looking for job for more than 10 years. It does not add value. But if we have a national conversation, then we'll be able to say, for these programs, we may require this number of people for this, and it can be done, including the fees that they have done. It is possible that even public universities, you know, sometimes we are asking ourselves, why should a program in one public university have a different fee from another public university? Does it mean that public universities cannot come down and sit together and say, for Bachelor of Education, this is the cost? Because again, we are also denying students an opportunity to pursue a program in a university that they need to do it. So maybe that one is for prof. Is it possible that prof, you can sit down and say, for public university, this program of medicine, this is the fee. The same way, the government, if you look at national secondary schools, they have the same fee. What you pay in Alliance and somebody who goes to Maseno school is the same, is standardized. We can also have the same in public universities, so that now what is left out is how do they deliver, their modes of delivery for that program.
All right. Professor KIAMA, before I ask, where are we taking these degrees anyway? I've seen a picture of you here in the Standard from the 18th of May, and you are sitting next here to the Cabinet Secretary for Education during the launch of the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service. And at the university, and I was talking about Mwakenya kidogo tumepewa Mwakenya hapa na the Standard, and law at Daystar, which is private, 335,000 compared to Mount Kenya University, 170,000. Actuarial science, and we have a scientist in the building. Kabianga University, 290,000. Mount Kenya private, 110,000, I beg your pardon. Multimedia University Civil Engineering, 396,000. Technical University of Kenya, which is public, 300,000. So this is interesting. It's more for some of these courses, it's more expensive to undertake them in a public university, like Mr. Kingori was saying. JQAT Maseno BA Medicine, JQAT Maseno Moi, 612,000, Egerton 337,940, Bachelor in Commerce, African Nazarene Private, 227,500, Management, University of Africa, Private, 78,600, Bachelor in Science and in Computer Science, Multimedia, 360,000, Kiriri Women University of Science and Technology, 92,350. Bachelor of Communication in Journalism, Saimara, 275,400. MKU, which is private, is cheaper at 105,000. How? I would imagine that private would be more expensive, public would be cheaper. Professor KIAMA.
Now, I don't know whether you read also for Nairobi University, and you find it.
They haven't put. Can you imagine they haven't put?
It's very modest, yeah. like for medicine, we had for first year we had about 530,000 thereabout because of the discount that we gave. The law we had about 220 because of the discount that we gave. Now, there is what, and he has mentioned this, is it possible to have the same fees for all public universities? For instance, in 2015, the universities developed what is called the differentiated unit cost. And that was agreed across the board for all public universities. The input, it was known that for medicine, this is the number of staff you require for this number of students. Okay, if you are doing anatomy, this is the number you require. You need this professor, you need this number of senior lecturers, you need this lecturer, you need this, and then in the lab you need these materials, and this will be fees to package a student to a point that they come out with a degree in medicine and surgery, in veterinary medicine, in dental. And dental was the most expensive, yeah? And Bachelor of Arts, it was the cheapest. Because if you are talking about Bachelor of Arts, you are there, and you can have a class of 100, and you are this way, and you teach them, and that will be okay. In dentistry, you need to be literally almost one-to-one. As the student is attending to this patient, you are showing them. You cannot be 100 attending to patients, and you are... So that was the issue of the cost. Now, that is what has applied since that time. That fee has not changed despite the inflation. It was supposed to go higher. The DUC that was examined that time was supposed to continue increasing. It has not changed. So when now there was this debate about do we revert back to the DUC, there was consensus that that is what we need to do now, and begin to and continue to increase year by year. But it appears like some universities, some public universities may have chosen, instead of maybe giving the discount, they give a scholarship, what he was mentioning about, of the 15%. Rather than saying if the fees is 100,000, instead of declaring 85,000, you declare 100, but maybe you give a scholarship of the 15,000. You get it? So this is going to play out. We are going to see as the situation unfolds. But we had agreed as vice chancellors from public universities that we use the differentiated unit cost and apply the discount that we agreed with the president. Okay? Because we agreed on it on the basis that these institutions have been built using public funds. Yeah? So if a student is coming as a private student, then you can pay full fees. But if a student is being sponsored by government, then we give that discount to differentiate them. So that is that to get to know. Now, the other question you talked about, the private universities and public universities, why different fees? Why should it be more in public? You know, the public university, let's say like University of Nairobi, has been there the longest. University of Nairobi was conceptualized in 1946. Began admitting students in 1956. So it has been there, and therefore you find that the teachers that we have been there, have grown for a long time. I started teaching there in 1990. Many of those universities came and found when I was still myself teaching. And I have older people in the university, and their salaries have gone up, okay? If it is administration, if it is the professors, yeah, we have more. So the cost of running a program will be different from a university that started 2 years ago. it started in a different environment. Yeah. So the way they will get the number of staff will not be using the same model we use as University of Nairobi, because University of Nairobi used it because the government was paying the salaries. Now you are starting in an environment where it's not paying. So to bring in any one person, you have to think about it, where the money comes from. Now we cannot shed. We cannot reduce the programs we have. Take, for example, the design of the University of Nairobi. We are in multiple campuses, and that was designed by government. 13 or so campuses. Each of them has extra overhead costs that you need to take. If it's medicine in Kenyatta, if it's business management in Wakabete, if it's law in Parkland, if it's teaching in Kikuyu, etc., etc. And you find a number of public universities are like that. And even those which are not like that, they also found a loading of, for example, accommodation of students. Yeah? Even it's like Kenyatta University. You know, it started in 1985, 86, thereabout. And when it came, the accommodation of students was one of the key things for public university. The private university do not have to think about your accommodation. So we end up subsidizing that accommodation for students. Because if you charge the full cost, it's again going to be so heavy for the students. The private university do not have that burden. Yeah. So there are those variations, and the changing of the environment and the business mode that is coming, entrepreneurship, that is now, if you started today, you would not start it exactly the way it was done in 1950. Yeah. So that, okay. But yet you cannot shed those stuff. So the costs are definitely going to be higher than in a private university. The good thing, and the good thing you need to remember, is that the quality of education, because then there was no issue of limitation of resource. We did the best. If you come to Nairobi University dentistry, you find shares there for those students. They are the ones who, after that, they go and immediately they leave, they go and they open their own clinic here. Because they have all the skills they require to go and learn the business. If it's veterinary medicine, the same. Yeah. So that they don't need to go and do another mentorship, another this to do what. So there is the resourcing that was done to train those students, both the staff and the facilities, was the best. Yeah. Okay. And therefore high cost. The issue is what we have experienced in the recent years, when now there has been that drop of funding from government. And as I said, it is just because of priorities. Because the fuel subsidy, 1 year costed 81 billion Kenya shillings. This 61 is for several years. Yeah. So it is something that would have been just be fixed just like this. If all of us considered that university education is important for the Kenyan population. In Kenya, we just get about 7%, or now 17% going to universities. You find in some other countries about 60%, 50% of the population going to the universities. So we are still far behind.
All right.
In trying to get as many people as possible to be taught critical thinking skills, which is taught in the universities. Not technician skills, but skills to think and try to address environmental issues that will create more opportunity for more jobs. All you have to have those university graduates.
All right.
From university people, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof. Actually, Dan Mwangi did put on the poster, funding the power to read. You know, when you graduate, you're told now, it's normally you have now have the power to read or something like that.
Yes, yes.
Professor KIAMA is the one who has presided over. I have not. But I want to thank my panelists this morning, Professor Stephen KIAMA, Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, another product of University of Nairobi, though he is now the Vice Chancellor, the Management University of Africa. Yeah. Professor Washington Okeo, representing Charles Ringera, who is the CEO, HELB, on this panel. We thank Mr. Joseph Ndegwa Kingori, who is the Lending Manager, and Cyprian. Thank you for kutuchangamsha. Cyprian Ombati, National Vice Chairman, Oasu. Bado mapambano. That's it for me. My name is Olive Burrows. Have yourself a good Monday.
Thank you.